Welcome to the Book Party Podcast.
Join us as we journey into the world of books with Michael T.
Prepare to be captivated by engaging interviews, insightful discussions, and fascinating stories. You'll discover new adventures and gain insight into the creative process of the authors themselves as they share their struggles and accomplishments. Now let's hear from Michael T.
This is Michael T., and I welcome you here this morning with us, Book Party Podcast. It's fortunate today to sit down with a mindful author. She's not only an author, but a speaker, coach, and creator of Thriving Leader Collaborative. She believes that truly authentic leadership is achieved when we embrace our inner wisdom to overcome business challenges. As a NeuroMindfulness Practitioner, she lives at the intersection of well-being and leadership and has spent the last decade advising high-performing Fortune 500 leaders on how to explore intuitive pathways to success. Prior to founding the company, she spent over 30 years as a senior executive in the healthcare and hospitality sectors, including various five-star hotels, and advancing the guest model to patient care with the largest health system in the United States, HCA. She earned her MBA in healthcare management, her professional coach certification, PCC, and is certified NeuroMindfulness Practitioner. Today, I would like to introduce you to Terre Short and her book, The Words We Choose, Your Guide to How and Why Words Matter. Speak your truth, maximize the power of your voice, and deepen your connection with loved ones, colleagues, customers, and those who are unlike you. This book's stories, reflections, and activities empower you to choose words true to your values and intentions. The Words We Choose, Your Guide to How and Why Words Matter, transforms what you think in your head and align with how you feel in your heart for the greater good of all. Your voice is a choice. Terre, why don't you take it from here, fill in some of those blanks a bit, and tell our listeners about yourself.
Well, thanks so much, Michael. I'm honored to be here. I love what you do and the giving a voice to authors. I basically feel that everybody has a book in them. And so you're inspiring that, right? That everybody has a book in them, and how to when you listen to others like myself, when people, your listeners, listen to others talk about their journey, then they know that they too can write a book. So I had a book in me for a long time, more than one book. So only one's gotten out yet so far. But I've had a book in me for a long time. And when I had a hospitality career, and then I moved into healthcare, and all along in all my leadership positions, and particularly as I went up the corporate ladder, I just sort of became obsessed with how people were choosing to say things. How, when I was in hospitality with Four Seasons, how the employees chose to say things to the guest. And then when I was in healthcare, how the clinicians chose to say things to patients. And so it always was whirling around in my head, how leaders chose to say things to their direct reports. And I thought, whoa, wait a minute, let's create some tools, and let's provide some guidance for pulling that together. And so that's why I wrote the book.
Fantastic. So in your journey as an author, did you choose to take this journey as a self-publishing author, or did you take this journey as an agency author, or something in between?
Something in between. Something in between. So, I intended to self-publish from the very beginning. And it's easier not easier. It's easier in a different way, let's say, but I wanted to maintain that control. And then just through happenstance with a connection that I had, someone turned me on to a hybrid publisher called Epigraph. And I had an incredible experience with them. So I went very, very hybrid.
Okay. So did you have to collaborate then with anything such as your cover design or your editing or any of that sort of thing, like formatting and stuff? Did you collaborate with any of that?
Yeah, so that interesting question, because I had an editor actually. Now that I'm thinking about it, the editor was already engaged before I chose the hybrid publisher. So she wasn't like actively editing yet, but we had already made the deal because I didn't have enough content yet. So I had the editor, and so what happened with them? I remember looking on a computer screen, and there were maybe 4 or 5 columns to choose from, like do everything yourself and they just send it to print, or they do editing and copywriting and formatting and cover and everything. So it was like a spectrum. And I remember that I chose about in the middle. So in the end, from that company, they did the cover, they did the formatting. I already had it edited. And and then they did the publishing. But so in the book, it says Epigraph Publishing, but it's considered self-published.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I understand.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, yeah, a lot of people don't want to really go to a traditional publisher, finding an agent and that, because
Mm-hmm.
it it number one takes an extreme amount of time before
Right.
they can get their book published, and then they fear of losing control, that the publisher wants to make all the changes and they're really not involved in the process. And
Mm-hmm.
so, they really don't want to do that. So more and more people are turning to the hybrid publisher. And I have a lot of people doing novels that are just completely going self-published,
Mm-hmm.
completely.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, maybe you can take us to a point that you would consider your your worst author moment in writing this book.
Well, I believe everybody has some self-doubt, right? So you go in these waves of self-doubt. And so I was in a wave of self-doubt, and I went to visit my parents. They live across the country from me. And I went for a visit, and like straight up, my mother said to me, "What? You're writing a book? What do you know about writing a book?" I already had the self-doubt, right? So want to know what I did? I put it in the book, Michael. I put it's like the first line of the first chapter was the quote from my mother.
Oh no.
Like, if you can't beat them, join them, right?
Right. Well, it's like I told my dad about a book. I told him after it was completely done. Matter of fact, I'd already written 3 before I'd even told him I'd written them. And he's 85 years old, and he said, "What? You wrote books on what?" Well, I've already raised 4 teenagers, and it happened to be the books are nonfiction, and they happen to be on raising teenagers. So I had a
Cool.
little bit of experience in that, so that's kind of what I did.
Yeah, love
Anyway,
it.
we're talking about an epiphany. At some point in time in writing your book, not actually while you were writing, but you could have been doing anything else. You could have been cooking, driving, talking to people, giving a speech, doing something else. And all of a sudden, a light bulb would go off in your head, a bright light. It's like a wow moment that just hits you. And all of a sudden, you got to grab a pen and paper and write this down right now. Because if you don't write it down right now, it's going to fade and you won't remember all of it later. Did you ever have an epiphany like that when you were writing this book?
It's interesting. I feel like I had a lot of those, and I took care of them straight away because I use my phone, right? So I use my phone to capture those notes. And so that, well, more of the epiphany for me might have been like, where did they all go? Because I was capturing them kind of fast and furious. But my aha moment, or my epiphany, actually, that I'd like to share is more about when I knew it was real. When I was like, oh my gosh, it's real. This is happening. And so I'm going to take you back to March of 2020. All right. So we were leaving the country on March 11th to arrive in New Zealand on March 13th of 2020, which, if you remember, that was a Friday the 13th. It was like kind of D-Day for COVID, where all travel stopped and such. But when it was all gone down, we were in flight because you lose a day. Well, anyway, I said to my husband, I can't go on this trip until I can get all the chapters together, and to the point where I can send, there were 6 chapters. I was sending one to each of 6 different people. for like a final review. And so I said, we're not going on this trip until I can do this. And he was just like, well, I don't know about that because like, we have these tickets. And I said, well, I'm making this pressure for myself. And I pushed send for each of those emails. I had them all geared up or whatever. And it was like a weight was lifted off of me. I went, wow, it's really going to happen. It's really going to happen. And I sent them and I had my aha moment that I was capable and it was going to work. And off it went to everybody. And now I needed to wait for their responses. And then I landed in New Zealand, Michael, for a 3-week trip that lasted 54 weeks. I actually got the book published while I was still in New Zealand. Everything happened. All the final stuff happened while I was there.
Very cool. Very cool. And having a book published, the feeling of that is pretty amazing to just say, I'm published.
It is.
Pretty cool, isn't it?
It is. I recall. So I got a box. I ordered, I'm in New Zealand. So I said to the publisher, send me 10. I didn't want a whole bunch. So he sent me 10 and we videoed me open the box. And, I can be animated and such, but my animation was just pure joy. It was just real. It was just the excitement of opening that box. And I hadn't held one of the books yet. So even the feel of the cover, which was perfect, and just, it's hard to explain the excitement of holding a book that has my name on the front page, on the title of it, on the cover of it.
Right. Yeah, that's fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go to today. What is the one thing about today that you are the most fired up about or excited about right now today?
The potential for my next book. Yeah, that's it. The potential for my next book, because, now I have one book under my belt. I know I can do it. I know the process, and I would like to talk a little bit about the process. So I know that I'm capable of it. And now I have the content in my mind and in my heart. And I'm so fired up about getting that out and publishing my second book. You've got 3 books on me, and because I think you have 4. So that once you get
number 4 is underway.
Yeah. And once you get that momentum going, that's a thing.
Yeah. Number 4 is underway now.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this is Michael T. Thank you for being with us this morning. We invite you to go to bookpartypodcast.com, hit that subscribe tab on top, and scroll down to the icon of your choice, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, or Odyssey, where you can find us on one of your favorite platforms. Download and follow us there. Leave a review, and please don't forget to sign up for our newsletter to get the latest information for our upcoming shows. Now, Terry, we're going to go into the lightning round. The lightning round was 4 pointed questions for 4 pointed answers. So before you actually became an author, before you penned this book, what was holding you back from becoming an author?
What I call my personal podcast now. So my personal podcast, meaning that internal narrative and the story I was telling myself, was what was holding me back.
The story you were telling yourself, which was what?
That I wasn't capable, and that, I didn't have enough to say, or what I was going to say wasn't valuable. And so when I say personal podcast, I see that as, now I understand. And that the writing of the book has helped me see this, that I'm the producer, director, narrator, host. I get to decide what that narrative is. And so I have much more control of it. And here's the crazy part, Michael. I learned that from writing my own book.
Exactly. The book's coming from you.
Yeah.
You're your own competition, so it's coming right from you. So you get to write it. Okay. So when you were writing your book, what was the best advice you had ever received?
It was a continuation of great advice, generally speaking, and that's trust the process. So I know that I know to trust the process, but when I was in it, I forgot that. It was easy to forget to trust the process, that with the review and the editing and all the things that were going to happen, that it was a process for a reason, and that I I'm wound pretty tightly. So I had to sort of sit back and say, okay, trust the process. It will all come to fruition and it'll happen.
Okay, so when you wrote your book, this isn't one of those questions, by the way. Did you create an outline before you wrote the book?
I did. So I wanted to, if I can talk for a minute about that. So not only did I write an outline, so I wrote an outline and that's separated into chapters. And then I sent, and there were a whole bunch. I just sort of like a whole outline thing. And I sent that around to 20 people and I got responses back from 12. Still makes me wonder about those other 8. But anyway, I got the responses back and that information. So I was asking them what resonated and that really helped me refine it to get to what became my ultimate chapters. So that part was very
Okay.
important. Yeah.
I know some people that don't even use an outline, and I could not do it without a good, solid outline and then subheadings under
Yep.
each chapter, to guide what you're writing in those chapters. Those subheadings got to be there. And I'm writing nonfiction, and I have to do a lot of research in each one of them to make sure the accuracy is there for them, Has to
I
be an
agree.
accurate book.
Yeah.
Okay, away from that. Share one of your personal habits that contributes to your success.
Straight up what I call calendaring. I calendar everything and I calendared the writing of the book. I mean, I had a full-time job. I had a lot going on. So it was like most people do. You don't just like stop working and write a book, right? That's my dream. That's the luxury I want someday. But so I calendared. So I did the research, nonfiction book, 50 to 55,000 words. How many words could I write in an hour? How many hours can I commit to each day? So then I said, okay, by such and such date, I'll have 55,000 words. So I
Yeah.
calendared that effort, and that's my biggest tip is that's how you make it happen because you're committing to this many minutes, hours, whatever in a week to write.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Could you share with our listeners at least one internet resource that you use when you're writing?
Okay, well, I did not have Jet GPT or whatever you call it, or BARD or any of those things. But these days, I would be inclined to do a little bit of a little AI on the side, probably. But my number one resource ties back to my calendaring. So I use OneNote. So OneNote or Evernote or any one of those resources where it's on my phone, it's on my iPad, it's on my computer screen. So every time I have a minute or like a thought, like you were saying, then, an aha moment, an epiphany, then I can go, add a story about that. And then I can go to OneNote and find the right folder and just pop it in there. So it was a way to keep everything organized. And not only that, but my phone and my iPad, if I pulled up and it said, and now it's time to write. Okay, it's like this time, the calendar says it's time for me to write for 2 hours. I go to OneNote and I pull up a folder and I look at what I'm going to research or what pops up that still is a gap. And I might see a story related to X and I'll go, oh, right, I know that story. And I just push the record button and I would speak the story into OneNote. And then that would be that. And then I'd go back and edit it before it ever got into like one of the chapters. So it really helped me streamline the process.
Okay, great. Terry, we're going to enter the grand finale at this point. So why don't you tell our listeners a way that they can get in touch with you, follow you, find your book, and then take your time and tell our listeners just about your book.
Fantastic. I would love to, and I'm honored to have the opportunity, Michael. So you can get a hold of me, Terre, Terre, at thrivinglc.com. And the website is thrivingleadercollaborative.com. Lots of good resources on there, including the first chapter of my book on there free. So how to get a hold of me. So that's that. So I will just now tell you about the book. So the book, it's The Words We Choose, Your Guide to How and Why Words Matter. And when I started writing this book, as I told you, I sent out the chapters. It became very clear to me that the very beginning has to be that internal narrative. So that's why the first chapter starts with my mother telling me, what do you know about writing a book, and that sort of thing. And the words that she chose, then she put that narrative in my mind. And so the whole first chapter is about emotional intelligence and self-awareness and how to create a better story internally, because it starts there. Like I can't be confident that I'm going to choose better words at work or with my loved ones or with the children until I have it straight in my own mind and my own heart. So the book starts out there, and then it does go to words we choose with loved ones, because there's a history that we have. And sometimes we get activated when, we're with our loved ones and certain things are said. And so that's important too, then, to understand that there's a different dynamic going on that may or may not enable you to choose your words well. And so I talk a bit about that. And I go into quite a bit. You mentioned about the teenagers, about the importance to me of word choices when my children were younger, and choosing very wisely so as to not sway them in certain ways. And so I paid a lot of attention to that. And I was already doing that well before I thought to write the book. So anyway, so I go into with the loved ones, and then eventually we get to sort of the world at large. And I cover topics such as ageism and racism and sexism and all the isms, right? And how word choices can have a either positive or negative effect. And then we get to work, and we talk about words we choose at work. And I weave in my hospitality and healthcare experience and the impact of words for vulnerable patients and such, and any kind of customer service. And then words we choose, like besides speaking, email and text and the use of emojis, how we're expressing ourselves. And I end with the words we choose in setting intentions, in perhaps when we're praying, when we're really seeking guidance, how important it is to be intentional about those word choices. So that's how I wrap it all up.
I want to thank you so much for being here with us today, opening up to us, and I'm sure our listeners appreciate it too. Again, this is Michael T., and I thank you for being with us this morning. To all our listeners, I'd like to invite you to go to bookpartypodcast.com, hit that subscribe tab on top, scroll down to the icon of your choice where you can find us on one of your favorite platforms, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, or Odyssey. You can download and follow us there, and please leave a review. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter and get the latest information on our upcoming shows.
You must not miss our next episode as we delve into a world of inspiration, entertainment, and thought-provoking insights. Join Michael T. on the next Book Party podcast and experience a new adventure, a new story, and a complete immersion into the world of Pages Unveiled, Chronicles of the Writing Journey.